Hey folks, welcome back. Get excited, because today I'm coming at you with a new edition of my longest running series. Did They Wang It? I guess in theory it's really my only running series. All my other ones are sitting down. Am I right? I'm sorry, that was f***ing stupid. Let's just move on with the video. Look, we've already danced this dance many times before. Uh-oh, Ben forgot to take his Alzheimer's medication. He's going on about Resident Evil for the millionth time. Yeah, Resident Evil? Good. That's my stance. But you know what? I've never really talked at length about the first one. I mean, I've mentioned it 100 times, but only really in passing or in reference to other games. So you know what? F*** it. We're all gonna die someday. May as well spend your limited time on this planet watching me meticulously break down a 25-year-old PlayStation game. Let me set the scene. Osaka, Japan. The year 1990... something. I don't know. The early 90s. Capcom is one of the biggest video game developers and publishers in the world, known for hugely successful franchises such as Mega Man, Street Fighter, Ghosts and Goblins, Strider, Final Fight, Breath of Fire, and so on. One day, during a meeting, video game man Tokuro Fujiwara says, "What if... scary?" Blown away, Mr. Capcom gave the green light to begin working right away. Fujiwara, who originally wanted to make a remake of his NES title Sweet Home, enlisted fellow video game man and baseball cap aficionado Shinji Mikami to direct the project. And so, after years of development, tweaks, changes, and prototypes, Biohazard was released to the masses in March of 1996, for some reason titled Resident Evil in North America and PAL regions. For years, people have wondered, what the f*** does Resident Evil mean? But also, who cares, because it sounds cool. But anyway, Resident Evil came out, and it was immediately massively successful. It became the highest-selling game on the PS1 very soon after release. These days, it's arguably Capcom's biggest franchise. Resident Evil 8 just came out, and it was fucking awesome. I'm not calling it Resident Evil Village. It's probably worth noting that this game was re-released a couple times during the PS1 era. Resident Evil Director's Cut changed up some of the enemy placements and added an auto-aim feature, and Director's Cut DualShock Edition made the game compatible with the PlayStation DualShock controller, the one with the sticks. It also went for a different tone with the music, let's say. Here's the basement theme of the original Resident Evil. Pretty spooky, right? Well, here's the music that plays in the same area in the director's cut. This is 1,000,000% real. But for this video, I'm examining the game as it came out in 1996. This is as OG as it gets. We get to choose between two different playable characters, Chris Redfield and Jill Valentine. I guess. I'll take your word for it. I mean, you guys probably know. You made the game. I'm just some guy. The game opens with this pretty cool live-action cutscene. In the exciting future year of 1998, a series of gruesome murders have been taking place in the forest surrounding Raccoon City, a mid-sized city somewhere in the Midwestern United States. The Raccoon City Police Department's Special Tactics and Rescue Service, or STARS, is assigned with investigating the murders. After the STARS Bravo team's helicopter went missing in the woods, Alpha Team is sent to find the other STARS members and investigate the murders. Alpha Team is made up of Chris, Jill, Captain Albert Wesker, Barry Burton, Brad Vickers, and some other guy who gets killed during the opening cutscene, who cares. After the Alpha Team is attacked by doggies, Brad, who's flying the helicopter, f***s off, leaving his homies high and dry. So Chris, Jill, Wesker, and Barry rush to the nearby Spencer mansion. Once you actually get into the game, the plot is generally the same, but the events differ slightly depending on which character you picked. If you're playing as Jill, her, Barry, and Wesker make it into the mansion, but Chris is nowhere to be found. Whereas if you're playing as Chris, Barry is the one missing. Aside from the difference in events, there are a few distinctions between Jill and Chris. I personally vastly prefer playing as Jill over Chris because 1, playing this game as Chris is a nightmare, and 2, I like Jill better as a character. Oh, Ben, you only like Jill better because she's a girl. Correct. Chris is faster, can take more damage, and aims more accurately. There are locked doors and drawers throughout the mansion that have ammo and health items and stuff. Chris has to collect single-use keys to unlock them. At the beginning of Jill's campaign, however, Barry gives her a lockpick, and because she's
the master of unlocking,
she can just unlock everything no problem. Jill also gets the bazooka, whereas Chris gets the flamethrower. Also, each character has a friend that routinely bumps into them throughout the game and helps them out in one way or another. Jill regularly gets rescued by Barry, since she's a girl and can't do shit for herself. Chris, on the other hand, crosses paths with Rebecca Chambers, a rookie cop who is the only surviving member of the STARS Bravo team, and she more often than not gets herself in trouble and you have to go save her. Unless, of course, Chris is tasked with doing something the solution for which is anything other than kill or smash, such as play the piano or solve a puzzle. He of course gets Rebecca to do it, since she has small, dainty female hands, perfect for playing the piano. Jill, being a woman, can also play the piano, so she can just do it herself. The biggest factor that differentiates Chris from Jill is the fact that Chris has 6 inventory slots, Jill has 8. This might seem like a minor thing, but trust me, these 2 item slots missing from Chris's inventory necessitates you to make like 1,000 more trips to the item box than if you were playing as Jill. It's fucking annoying, okay? So we're playing as Jill, deal with it. Anyway, Bill, Jesker, and Wary find themselves in a mansion, but Chris is nowhere to be seen. They hear a gunshot coming from the west side of the house, so Barry and Jill go to investigate. Barry finds some blood on the floor, and Jill carries on alone. And then we get one of the most iconic cutscenes in any video game. This zombie slowly sitting up and turning its head toward you. You needn't worry about wasting ammo on this fella, because if you run back into the dining room, Barry will blow his head off for you. Barry and Jill return to the main foyer to tell Wesker, but he's nowhere to be found, so they decide to break up and search for him, which is a good call. From there, the game just kind of sets you on your way. It's up to you to figure out what the hell you're supposed to do. You traverse the mansion, finding specially marked keys and solving puzzles. Unfortunately, this mansion is like a mansion. It's largely confusing to navigate, and you can't just traverse the whole thing in one go. Certain doors require certain keys, which you get progressively throughout the game. Some areas are blocked off or inaccessible for one reason or another, like this door, which you can only go through one way because the doorknob is broken. At one point, you enter this room and find a shotgun hanging on the wall. Hell yeah, free shotgun. But just our luck. The shotgun was actually sitting on a pressure plate that prevented the ceiling from crushing us. Thankfully, Barry shows up and he kicks the door down. And then he delivers the greatest line in the history of narrative storytelling.
That was too close. You were almost a Jill sandwich.
You're right.
Anyway, after finding the 4 crests, we find our way outside of the mansion and head off to the residence. A little house on the outskirts of the property that is, you guessed it, fronting for an illegal biomedical research laboratory. And on the way, we get to witness the debut of one of the oldest recurring characters in the Resident Evil series, Crank. Right up there with Leon Kennedy and Bolt Cutters. So then we make our way through this little house with these giant spiders. You thought T-Virus zombies and T-Virus dogs were scary? Get this. T-Virus shark. Which kind of just behave like normal sharks, but still. Sharks ain't getting your goat? We'll get fucking ready because T-Virus plant. Which is actually a lot scarier than it sounds. You get the final mansion key and then you're reunited with Wesker, who is not acting suspiciously whatsoever.
Where on earth have you been? You disappeared from the hall all of a sudden.
I'm sorry, but I have my reasons. Perhaps you guys have met them? It was all I could do to protect myself against those strange creatures.
So yeah, I should probably address the fact that the voice acting in this game is incredible.
Stop it! Don't open that door!
But Chris is...
What is it?
Kenneth was killed too. Maybe by this creature.
Whoa! What is it?
What? Oh! Oh no! Sorry, I didn't mean to do that.
You must be from the Bravo team.
Now, I want to make it abundantly clear that I am in no way criticizing the voice acting in this game. A lot of people love the acting in this game because it's so bad that it's good. It gives off this low-budget charm feeling. But I still sometimes hear people genuinely rag on games like this, Castlevania Symphony of the Night, Sonic Adventure, and others for having terrible voice acting. The thing you have to understand is that these games came from a time period where big AAA games weren't given the same kind of budgets that are afforded to games today. Resident Evil had a notably low budget, even for the time. These days, there's huge mainstream interest in video games. E3 is internationally covered news, and you have actual big-budget A-list actors appearing in video games. But in the 90s, sure, video games were taken more seriously than ever before, but there was still this idea that video games were kind of like a niche hobby. So producers that worked for big companies weren't really interested in investing a bunch of money into voice acting. I mean, think about it from a financial stance. If the majority of the people who are going to play this game are kids or teenagers who won't notice or care about the terrible voice acting, why even bother funding that when you can instead put money into stuff like full motion video or enemy AI or visuals? And hey, would you rather have Keanu Reeves in your game that barely functions, or terrible voice acting but an otherwise amazing game? Don't be f***ing smart with me, okay? You know the point I'm trying to make here. So anyway, with the final key in hand, we can head back to the mansion and open up the doors we haven't gone into yet. And you're probably thinking, no problem, the mansion will be a breeze. I already cleared out all the zombies out of there. Well, once you get back into the mansion, you're treated to this cutscene. There he is. So yes, the mansion is the same as you remember, but now, all of the areas that previously had zombies in them are now infested with Battletoads. These are hunters, the result of T-virus infected reptile DNA being injected into a human embryo. And let me tell you, these guys may look silly, but they will f*** you up no problem. They'll just straight up decapitate you. It's pretty brutal for 1996, honestly. If you were thinking that it might not be worthwhile to put the time into finding the Magnum revolvers, these guys will convince you otherwise, because you're going to be encountering a lot of hunters from here on, and the revolver can take them out in 1 or 2 hits. Meanwhile, they can tank 3 or 4 shotgun blasts before going down. But anyway, after exploring the mansion some more, you end up in the underground cave system, where you get another crank, yes! And finally, you make it to the underground research facility, the last area of the game. Down here you encounter zombies that spit acid at you for some reason, and also enhanced zombies, test subjects of the T-virus, who behave like normal zombies, but they do more damage and respawn after you leave the room. And also chimeras, nasty little insect-human hybrids that behave like monkeys and are a pain in the ass. Finally, we reach the finale. You of course learn that, spoiler, Wesker's a bad guy. He was actually working for Umbrella the whole time, working on his ultimate life form, Tyrant.
Wesker, you're pitiful.
And you're gay!
Wesker was actually trying to lure the STARS members out to the Spencer mansion so that he could use the Tyrant to kill them all off. He was also forcing Barry to assist him at threat of his wife and kids being killed. So you fight Tyrant and the mansion goes into self-destruct mode, because of course it does. This is a Resident Evil game. And then you escape to the rooftop where you're saved by Brad, along with Chris and or Barry, depending on which of the 6 endings you got. So that's a general synopsis of the plot of Resident Evil, at least from Jill's perspective. But we're getting a little ahead of ourselves. Let's back it up. I was gonna do like a visual gag, but I'm kind of stuck here. So Resident Evil is the original survival horror game. I'm sure you know this, but it's actually where the term survival horror was originally coined. That said, it's not really the first of its kind. I would argue that it was the game that brought mainstream appeal to horror games, but it has a fair share of predecessors. Without a doubt, the game that most strongly influenced Resident Evil 2 was the 1992 PC game Alone in the Dark, developed and published by Infogrames, the company with the worst name of all time. In fact, Resident Evil was supposed to be a first-person game, but after playing Alone in the Dark, Shinji Mikami decided to emulate that playstyle. So here we are. The game uses pre-rendered backgrounds and fixed camera angles, which was common in games during this time period. Final Fantasy and Zelda did the same thing. Essentially what this means is that all the backgrounds in this game are images, and the characters walk on top of them. And of course, that necessitates fixed camera angles. Obviously the backgrounds can't move because they're just static images. Some people don't like this style, they say it's ugly, but I'm personally a big fan of it. Like, this game is pretty visually stunning for 1996, and a lot of that comes down to the pre-rendered backgrounds taking up considerably less space on a PS1 disc than if they made all the backgrounds in-engine. Plus, it means that the character models and the things you can interact with are visually distinct from the background. You can see here that the item box clearly pops out from the other things in the room, but it doesn't stick out enough to be ugly. But other than that, there's the controls. The controls suck ass. No, I'm just kidding. They're not that bad, they're just outdated. Obviously, the thing that turns people off the most is the tank controls. Basically, rather than the character just moving around based on what button you press, the up and down buttons make the character go forward and backward respectively, and the left and right buttons make the character turn in that direction. And also, this isn't based on the camera angle. If you press right, Jill moves to her right, even if she's facing the camera. People hate this shit. It's definitely something you have to get used to. Although a lot of people just say f this and stop playing, and honestly I can't blame them all that much. There's a great debate as to why the old Resident Evil games had tank controls. A lot of people say it adds to the immersion, it's scarier because it's fucking impossible to control your character. And I always used to think it had to do with the PS1 controller not having analog sticks initially. But to be honest, I don't really think it's either of those things. I think it would be giving them too much credit to say that it was intentional, and I don't think limitations had anything to do with it. Because plenty of PS1 games, Crash Bandicoot for example, control fine with a D-pad. Honestly, I think it was just a weird decision they made. Probably due to the fact that Alone in the Dark had tank controls, and since the first Resident Evil game was so successful, they didn't feel the need to change it in 2 or 3. Now, I've stated on many occasions that I am very cool and awesome because I like tank controls, and being a contrarian makes you cool. But I've never really explained in depth why I like tank controls. And I figure, now is as good a time as any. I am looking at the granddaddy of Bubsy controls. Here's the thing. I wouldn't go so far as to say that I like tank controls better than normal controls, but I do think that in the context of games where you have very limited control or no control at all over the camera, tank controls confuse me less. In any given area in Resident Evil, you're gonna cut to like 4 different camera angles. So for me, the fact that I can keep holding forward regardless of where the camera is relative to Jill feels better. Take for example Silent Hill 4. There are parts of this game that have fixed camera angles, but the game uses the more traditional control scheme rather than tank controls. This means that when the camera switches angles on you, because you were holding down to go forward in the last screen, you're now holding the direction that should logically make you go backwards. To its credit, Henry will keep going in the same direction until you stop moving, but there's something about this that's disorienting for me, I don't know. But basically, all that summed up is, in my opinion, tank control's good. Not always good, but good. I'm sure you are all dying to hear my long, drawn-out opinions on tank controls. Controls aside, this game is very cryptic and unforgiving. Seriously, if you can beat this game without a walkthrough on your first try, you're fucking lying to me right now. How could you? This game seriously does not tell you anything. It's just like, good luck, buddy, don't let the zombies kill you. To be fair, the puzzles always hint at what you're supposed to do, but I don't think it would be unreasonable for the average person to pick up this game, run around for like an hour, and have no idea what the hell to do or where to go. And I mean, it certainly doesn't help that your map looks like this. It's just a bunch of squares. It gives you nothing. It tells you the general outline, but it doesn't tell you which rooms are save rooms, it doesn't outline which doors are locked, or which doors are inaccessible or anything. You better write up your own diagram with notes if you don't want to run around like an asshole checking the same rooms over and over. I mean, compare it to Resident Evil 2. The doors are at least color-coded based on which key you're supposed to use on them. It gives you something of an idea as to where you're supposed to go. I've heard people say, oh, the color-coded keys in Resident Evil 2 make it too linear. But I totally disagree. You still have to run around and explore the police station, and it's still worthwhile to keep in mind what's going on in every hallway in case you want to avoid certain monsters and stuff. And on top of all of that, you have to use a goddamn ink ribbon to save. And holy shit, this game is not charitable with the ink ribbons. You barely get any at all. So you have to make everything count. You can't dick around and not know where you're going because you barely ever get an opportunity to save. All of that said though, part of me kind of wishes that I got to experience what it must have been like when this game was new and I had a bunch of friends who also had it. I love the internet, but one of my favorite things about cryptic, confusing video games like this is discussing it with my friends and giving each other tips and tricks about what to do. Dark Souls was like that for me. All of my buds were playing it at the same time and we would hang out and be like, oh dude, the Capra Demon is way easier if you climb up onto the wall and plunge attack him. I get a similar vibe about Resident Evil. I bet it would have been fun to have a friend over and be like, oh, when Barry drops the rope into the basement, don't run away, because he'll come back and give you another rope. Holy shit, Resident Evil. What a game! But this isn't just any video game company we're talking about here. This is Capcom, and Capcom loves making their games available on every platform you could feasibly imagine. And it was that desire to appeal to the biggest audience and or lust for infinite wealth that resulted in the creation of a full-on remake of this game for the GameCube. Welcome to 2002, baby. Do you own a GameCube? Probably not. Yeah, so Nintendo was struggling financially with its scrappy little game box, which was to be expected since it was competing with the juggernaut that was the PS2, a video game console so powerful that people genuinely actually thought that it was capable of being turned into a supercomputer to be used by terrorists. I wish I was joking about that. So in an effort to boost the sales of the GameCube, Nintendo signed an exclusivity deal with Capcom to make Resident Evil, a fully fledged remake of the PS1 game. They even got Shinji Mikami to come on board to direct it, reprising a role he hadn't taken for any of the game's sequels at the time. Capcom clearly had big plans for this. Despite the less than impressive sales, The game received widespread critical acclaim and has since been ported and remastered in HD. So let's just kick the door down and hop right in. We start off the game and we're given a really weird difficulty screen. How do you like your games? 1. Like climbing a mountain. Fulfilling, but takes a lot of work. 2. Like going on a hike. Good exercise, but not too strenuous. And 3. Like taking a walk. You can relax and enjoy yourself. What the f***? Did they think easy, normal, and hard would have been too confusing? I don't understand. Whatever, after that we pick Chris or Jill, and one thing that's kind of cool about the HD remaster is that you can choose to play as the costumes that they wear in the DLC chapters of Resident Evil 5. Look at that, their little ID cards even say BSAA on them, that's neato. After that it plays this really cool cutscene, which is actually made in-engine rather than live action. Same deal though, doggies attack, so the gang runs to the Spencer mansion and Chris is nowhere to be found. Jill encounters the zombie and Barry takes care of it, although he doesn't blow its head off. As you're leaving through the dining hall, it cuts back to the other side, showing that the zombie got up and left. So now we know that zombies are no longer hindered by doors. Great, love that. And then from there, it's very similar in terms of events. The main hall is Weskerless, Barry and Jill split up, and all the wacky things that occur in the original happen in the new one. Umbrella been experimenting, Wesker was in on it, yada yada, we've been here before. That said, there are a lot of noticeable differences between the original and the remake. For one thing, there's a smaller gap between Jill and Chris in terms of difficulty. The original basically made Chris hard mode and Jill easy mode. Barry will save you from getting crushed in the shotgun room. He'll warp you back to the safe room after getting poisoned by the snake. He'll drop a rope down for Jill, leading to the basement, while Chris will just get stuck down there, etc. The differences are still there in the remake, but both characters have more ups and downs than in the original. In Jill's campaign, Barry will save you from getting crushed, but only if you haven't already encountered him in the main hall before going to the shotgun room, so you have to be a little bit more strategic while navigating. Also, to compensate for Jill having a lockpick that she doesn't need to equip, Chris has a lighter. Jill gets the lighter as well, but she has to find it in the mansion and it takes up an inventory space. All that said though, Chris still only has 6 inventory slots, so I still considerably prefer playing as Jill. Say what you will, but those 2 inventory slots save you like 1,000 trips to an item box in the long run. But enough about Jis and Krill. I really want to break down the differences between the original and the remake, because they are wholly different experiences. And I feel obligated to keep talking here for some reason. I have a lot of opinions on these games, and if I just rambled non-stop for a year, I don't think any of us would have any fun. So with that said, I've decided to break my analysis into 3 sections: accessibility, gameplay, and most importantly, horror and atmosphere. When I say accessibility, you might think that I'm implying that this game was made easier than the original. And that's not necessarily the case. The remake isn't easier per se. I think it just focuses more on appealing to a larger audience. The original Resident Evil is a classic. I absolutely love it. That said though, it's one of the very few older games that I totally understand when people say that they can't get into it. Tank controls are really weird to wrap your head around. It requires a consumable to save your game, and it gives you absolutely zero indication as to what the hell you're supposed to do. The remake doesn't perfectly remedy all of these problems, but it is undoubtedly a lot easier to get into. The main thing is the tank controls, and I think they really fixed that issue in the best way possible. Right when you start the game, there's a menu with some options, and one of them is Control Scheme, Alternate or Original, giving you the option to either play the game as a normal person, or if you're super awesome and all the chicks dig you like me, you can play with tank controls. It's a good way of keeping everyone satisfied. It makes it so that the average person can get into the game, but it also keeps the remake honest to the original. Other than that, they also added the auto-aim from the director's cut, difficulties, and gave you a reasonable amount of fucking ink ribbons, Jesus Christ. In the old game, the majority of the ink ribbons are hidden, and they only ever give you 2 at a time. And even when they're out in the open, like, holy shit, man. See that? That little square right there? That's an ink ribbon. That's the item that you need to save your progress. This game was made by psychopaths. I will say that the game basically still doesn't tell you what to do, and I don't know if that's necessarily a bad thing. I think people would have been mad if they made it a little bit more hand-holdy. But at the very least, the map tells you where the save rooms are and color codes the doors. Blue means you can go through it, red means that it's locked, and gray means that you haven't checked it yet. It still relies on you to keep track of stuff, but it feels a little bit less like the game is actively trying to handicap you. But overall, as far as accessibility goes, I think they did a perfect job of appealing to both newcomers and longtime fans. Hard mode makes the game a lot more similar to the original in that there are a few item pickups, so people going for a tougher old school experience can put the difficulty up and use the tank controls. But people who are new to the Resident Evil franchise or just don't want to get their ass beat can go for easy or normal mode and use the normal controls. It's still cryptic and confusing, but I don't think the game would have the same magic if it wasn't. I think they fixed really everything they could while still maintaining the spirit of the PS1 game. Moving on to the second category to compare is the gameplay, which is distinct from accessibility. How is it different, you may ask? Well, I don't know. I couldn't think of a different word to categorize my different sections. Leave me alone. So the Resident Evil remake really went for the same but different kind of vibe. It's the same mansion as before, but a lot of the things you do are at the very least slightly different. Plus, they included this entire courtyard area. Like, a lot of the locations for items are different. In the original, the armor key is blocked off by a giant plant monster, which you have to kill with the herbicide. Whereas in the remake, you have to get a collar off of one of the dogs, open it to get a fake armor key, and then use it to replace the real key to deactivate a trap. And then on the other hand, to get the shield key, you have to take the emblem to the dining hall, play the piano, go in the secret room, replace the wooden emblem with the gold emblem, put the gold emblem in the dining hall, and the clock will move to reveal the key. It's the same in the remake, but they add one of my favorite puzzles in the game. There's this painting of these two guys stabbing each other. The long sword is going through the one dude's head, and the short sword is going through the other guy's torso. So you match the clock so that the hour hand, the shorter one, is pointing at the armor, and the minute hand is pointing at the helmet, so it matches the painting. It's neat. It's a cool little additional step. There's also the thing with Richard, where you have to run to get him some serum to cure his poison. In the original, Richard just dies, but your reward is the radio. Oh boy, now I get to watch a cutscene of Brad trying to get in contact with stars. In the remake, though, if you save Richard in time, he'll run in and shoot the big snakey the first time you encounter it. And then, after he gets eaten by the snake, you get to take his more powerful shotgun that can hold more bullets. Hell yeah, a new shotgun! And all it cost was one measly human life. On the other hand, I think they made some of the puzzles needlessly complicated to elongate the game and differentiate it from the original. Like, I mean, look at the armor key and think about it from the perspective of a new player. In the original, you walk to the first safe room and the herbicide is there. You pick it up and think, okay, whatever, I guess I might need this later. And then you go into this room with the giant plant and you're like, oh, this is what I need the plant chemical for. That makes sense. So you grab it and you get the key. Bada bing, you earned it, buddy. But in the remake, you need to get this dog whistle from this random room, go outside to this patio area or whatever, blow the whistle to summon the doggies, check the collar, open it up, and it gives you a fake key. And then you gotta go to the other side of the mansion to replace the real key with the fake key. I really don't think it's unreasonable to be like, how the f was I supposed to know to do that? And there's a few puzzles like that. I don't want to get too far into it, but they for sure made it needlessly convoluted at points. But overall, the gameplay has changed enough that it gives a unique experience without changing it too much to piss off the old school fans. In the original, if you equip the shotgun and hold it up when a zombie's near you, you can blow their head off, instant kill. Whereas in the remake, it seems like it's not as 100%. There's still a chance that you'll just down them. Also, the dogs are actually a threat. In the original, you can take them out with a few pistol shots, no problem. But in the remake, you pretty much have to use the shotgun. So yes, it's a good game, that's all well and good, but I think it's important that we move on to the most important category. The scary. Resident Evil was all about the horror, man. Even if the vision of the series has changed over time, the original game provided an experience that the vast majority of people had never had before. And the coolest thing about the original Resident Evil game is how it uses the gameplay to make it scary. Resident Evil 1 played up the feeling of helplessness by doing things like making enemies really hard to kill, limiting your inventory space, giving you no fucking items at all. The point of the original Resident Evil was that if you really put your mind to it, you can beat this game without killing a single enemy. It's often more beneficial to try and navigate around the enemies. Easier said than done, but you know. But either way, it was scary because it was so hard and it made you meticulously plan everything you do and take the items you need and try not to waste any bullets or anything. Now, as I said earlier, the remake is a lot more charitable with items, particularly ink ribbons, which I think is a good thing. The lack of ink ribbons doesn't really add to the horror, it's just kind of annoying. But bullets are slightly more abundant. It's still worthwhile to be conservative with them, but you're less likely to run out of bullets entirely. So you're probably thinking, well, Ben, if they give you more items, doesn't that take away from the horror? Doesn't that basically mean that you can just kill all the zombies? I remember when I was young and stupid and ignorant and dumb and stupid like you. So we're in the remake, running around having a grand old time, and you kill a zombie, and there he is. He's laying there. And then you leave the room to go do something, you come back, and hey, he's still there, that's kind of funny. In the old game, the zombies disappear after you kill them, but I guess not anymore. But then, later on, you go back, and... oh! He gets back up. He stands back, and he doesn't do it normal. He does it all backwards and scary, like a scary monster man. That's awesome. That's great. I'm thrilled to hear that. So how does the remake incentivize you against killing the zombies, you ask? Like this. They do it like that. These are Crimsons. They're super powerful red zombies with claws that run really fast and take a lot more firepower to kill. Every zombie you kill in this game will eventually turn into one of these, unless you get lucky and blow their head off while they're a normal zombie. Or you can burn them before they get a chance to transform, which requires a lighter and kerosene. The kerosene tankard can only carry 2 zombies worth of fuel, and each jug of gas only has enough for 6 refills. So if you kill a zombie, you better run back to the save room and grab your lighter and gas to burn it, unless you want it coming Kirby right back at you. This is another instance in which Chris has an advantage over Jill. Like I said, he doesn't have to equip the lighter, so burning a zombie only takes 1 item slot instead of 2. But other than that, is this game scary? Fucking yeah, it is. It's just peak horror atmosphere. It feels like what the original was going for with better visuals. And on that note, look at these goddamn graphics, man. Holy smokes. This was on the GameCube. Sure, it's the HD remaster, but it looked like this in 2002, just with lower resolution. And this was early GameCube too, but it still sits firmly as one of the best looking games on the console. But this game has that thick, juicy atmosphere, you know what I'm saying? The camera angles make it cramped and claustrophobic. You can't see zombies that are right in front of you. The monsters make noises off screen and you can hear them when they're walking toward you. The music comes in and out, seemingly at random. There's shit like this where you walk into this room and this dude is hanging here and you can read his suicide note. And then you walk into the bathroom and you hear... Uh-oh. I mean, yeah, obviously, but it's still cool. But one of the coolest things about the Resident Evil remake is the addition of one character. Lisa Trevor. One of the most popular things about the Resident Evil series is how it uses documents scattered about the various locations that you can read to learn things about the story and the lore. As you're exploring the Spencer Mansion, you frequently come across the name Lisa Trevor, a little girl who was the daughter of one of the owners of Trevor and Chamberlain, the company that built the Spencer Mansion. She was kidnapped and subject to nearly 3 decades of experimentation, being injected with every virus Umbrella could come up with. And lucky for us, we get to cross paths with Lisa. And she looks like that. Oh man. I love how they do it too, because in order to get the crank to open the waterway to get to the little residence, you have to go through this shoddy little cabin that they've held her captive in. And on the way there, you can hear her in the distance. Admittedly, I kind of wish that she played more of a role. Once you leave the estate, you don't really see her again until a boss fight at the end of the game. I think it would have been cool if she was like following you around the mansion or something. Although maybe I shouldn't be wishing for more bullshit in the mansion. But it's neat that they included this whole different side plot that also brings in plot points from the other games in the series, even going so far as to foreshadow the events of Resident Evil 5, 7 years before it came out. So all of that taken into consideration, the age-old question must be asked. Did they wang it? Well, it's a little bit more complicated than you might think. Well, no, it's not. The answer's no, but I want to talk more. Remaking a video game is a lot more difficult of an endeavor than a lot of people think. Or at least remaking a video game properly. Sometimes you play a remake and you think, well, this is fun and it looks better, but if they didn't really fix the outdated bullshit from the original, why did they even bother spending money on this? And then on the other hand, some remakes are such improvements that they make the original completely obsolete. Sometimes a remake is just straight up worse than the original. The Resident Evil remake is an example of none of these things. This is, in my opinion, one of the best video game remakes of all time. This game implements all of the improvements made in subsequent releases, such as the auto-aim, different difficulties, and actually giving you enough ink ribbons. It maintained that which made the original Resident Evil so special to a lot of people. It still has the fixed camera angles, the atmosphere, the incredible visuals, the subtle storytelling, but it also changed the game enough so as to make it so that longtime fans of the series don't just know exactly what to do. It's a new experience for them too. A lot of the puzzles are different and certain aspects of the mansions are laid out completely differently. It's a perfect example of a remake that pays respect to its source material while also throwing in stuff to divert your expectations. Take, for example, the doggy hallway. In the original, dogs jump through the windows and attack you, but in the remake, this happens. Haha, gotcha, there's no dogs. But if you go back through the door, the dogs do jump through the windows. It's fucking brilliant. You just got Mikami, bitch. Overall, I love Resident Evil, both the original and the remake. And I think that the strength of the remake is that I can go back and play the original and still enjoy it. So there you have it, folks. After deliberating for probably too long, I feel comfortable saying Resident Evil good. I can honestly say that this is a remake that was definitely not wanged. Frankly, it's one of the best video game remakes of all time. And hey, one thing I forgot to mention is that the remake has totally new voice acting. And honestly, I'm not sure how I feel about that. One of my favorite things about the original Resident Evil is the terrible voice acting. But I mean, it can't be that bad. I'm sure they didn't change too much.
That was a close one. A second late, you would have fit nicely into a sandwich.
You fucking cowards.